وجميل سيدنا النبي وجميل قمرون قمرون قمر سيدنا النبي قمرون وجميل 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 سيدنا النبي وجميل.
Prophet said, Ashabi kan najum, my Sahaba are like stars. Whichever one of them you will follow, you will be guided. We need to present the real stars, not these fake superstars. The real stars need to be presented to the public. And that's the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So inshallah, I'm going to present Sayyidina Khalid Bin Walid to the young brothers and sisters that are here and the elders. And I hope it will be of great benefit to yourselves. I make dua that Allah give me tawfiq to speak the truth. Allah give me tawfiq to listen to the truth. Ultimately, tawfiq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْعَظِيمِ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأولين والآخرين. سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد: رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. صلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا نبي الله. صلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا رحمة للعالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations, peace and blessings upon the best of creation, the jewel of creation, the crown of creation, the beloved of Allah Almighty, the coolness to our eyes, the purpose of our lives, the reviver of our hearts, the inspirer to our minds, the awakener of our souls, the most honored one, the most praised one, the most revered one, the most merciful one, the most kind one, the most generous one, undoubtedly the most beautiful one. None other than Sayyiduna wa Nabiyyuna Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa barik wa sallam. As I mentioned before, young people living in the West are in need of positive role models. Young people are in need of learning and studying the lives of the great Muslim personalities of the past and present. Unfortunately, our young people are more interested in having role models, or such role models are being presented to them that are of no benefit in this dunya and no benefit in the akhirah. People like footballers, pop stars, singers, people that don't know them, and people that our young people aspire to be like. But in reality, I don't think there's any civilization or religion that can boast so many great personalities than the religion of Islam.
Subhanallah.
We have Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. We have Tariq ibn Ziyad. We have Umar Mukhtar. We have personalities like the great Ghaus al-A'zam Sayyidina Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani. We have people like Khwaja Mu'inuddin Chishti al-Ajmeri. We have Bahauddin Naqshband. We have Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. You don't know any of these. People don't know who these people are. They've never either been presented to the youth, or the youth are not interested in learning about them. There are reasons for this, and I don't want to delve too much into that. But, however, there are no greater role models and personalities for young Muslims to follow and embody than the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. There are many in the last 15 centuries of Islam, there are many. But they have not been referred to as stars. The companions of Rasulullah ﷺ have been referred to as stars by the Prophet ﷺ. My companions are like stars. Whichever one of them you follow, you will be guided. فَبِأَيِّهِمْ اِقْتَدَيْتُمْ اِهْتَدَيْتُمْ. Whichever one you follow, you will be guided. My companions are like stars. These are the real superstars. Companions like Sa'ad bin Abi Waqas. Companions like Abu Ubaidah bin al-Jarrah. Companions like Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. Companions like Zubair ibn al-Awwam. And Talha, the son of Ubaidullah. Talha ibn Ubaidillah. Companions like Sa'id bin Zayd. Companions like Sayyidina Bilal Habshi. Like Jabir ibn Abdullah. Many great companions like Suhaib of Rum and Salman of Faris. Dear beloved companions of the Prophet ﷺ like Zayd bin Haritha. And then great companions like Mullah Ali Mushkil Kusha. Karamallahu ta'ala wajhahu al-kareem. Companions like Sayyidina Uthman Zul-Nurayn. And companions like Sayyidina Umar, the son of Al-Khattab, very famously known as Umar Al-Faruq. Companions like Sayyidina Abu Bakr As-Siddiq, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Great personalities of Islam. These were individuals who spread Islam. These are individuals who have given the greatest services to Islam. And we are indebted to them. From amongst these companions, we find there is one that stands out when it came to the battlefield. One who stood out from them all when it came to bravery, when it came to becoming the greatest general in the history of mankind after the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is the greatest. Whatever Sayyidina Khalid Bin Walid achieved, in reality it's from the Prophet. But Sayyidina Khalid Bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, this great companion who we've gathered to listen to and to listen about, who this individual was. Why so many young people, mashallah, today are inspired by this great personality. You might think, what's the relevance of talking about Khalid bin Walid? There's great relevance. Because when you study the life of this great companion, we learn many things from his life. This was an individual who was determined. This was an individual who relied on Allah. This was an individual who had a purpose. This was an individual who was deep, an individual who was connected to Islam. It is these individuals who we need to learn about so that we can connect to Islam as well. We can build a connection with the religion of Islam. Sayyidina Khalid, the son of Walid, the son of Al-Mughira, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, was born in the year 586 after Domini AD. He was born 16 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 15, 16 years after Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. He was born 35 years before Hijrah, migration to the city of Medina Munawwara. 35 years before this. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was born in Makkah Mukarramah, the city of Makkah. And he was from the tribe of Banu Makhzum. The Banu Makhzum tribe was a tribe that formed the great tribe of the Quraysh. The Quraysh had small tribes that made the Quraysh. So Banu Makhzum, Banu Abdul Muttalib, Banu Hashim, Banu Umayyah, these were all tribes of the Quraysh. The Prophet ﷺ's tribe, they were Qurayshi. And the Prophet ﷺ's Banu Abdul Muttalib, Banu Hashim, who Rasulullah ﷺ, from whose descendants Nabi ﷺ came, Sayyidina Hashim radiallahu anhu. They were given responsibilities and duties of holding on to the Zamzam water, preserving this and feeding this to the Hujjaj. So every year when the people came to perform Hajj, they would come for the season of Hajj. There was no Hajj at that time, but for the season of Hajj, in the month of Hajj. When they would come to perform the rituals, the Prophet ﷺ's family were the ones who used to give them Zamzam water. The Prophet ﷺ's family were generally in charge. Khalid bin Walid's family, the Banu Makhzum, they were in charge of the military. They were in charge of the military. So if any attack was ever made on the Quraysh, who were the ones that were to defend? Who were the ones who were to take charge? Whose responsibility was it? It was Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's family. The Banu Makhzum, his family, brothers, cousin brothers, his uncles, his father and his grandfather. This was their responsibility. So they were in charge of the military. Immediately we learned Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid is born into a family that has connections to the military. He's born into a family of soldiers. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is related to the Prophet ﷺ from the Quraysh. Yani they're from the same tribe. The tribe of the Quraysh, the Prophet ﷺ is from there, so is Khalid bin Walid. We see that Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, whose father Walid, he was the general commander-in-chief of the Quraysh army. He was in charge. He was a wealthy businessman. As well as being a great soldier, he was a wealthy businessman. So Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu never needed to go out and work as a young man. His father had made it for him. So Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu lived a very easy life. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's mother's name was Lubaba as-Sughra. Lubaba as-Sughra was the sister of the Prophet's wife, Sayyidah Maymuna. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's mother was the Prophet's sister-in-law. Yes or no? Yes. Because Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's mother's name was Lubaba, the Prophet's wife's name was Sayyidah Maymuna, and Sayyidah Maymuna and the Prophet and Khalid bin Walid's mother were sisters. Therefore that made Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's mother, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam's sister-in-law. So there was a relation there. And we see that Lubaba was also the sister of Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu's wife. So there were three sisters. One married Sayyidina Abbas, one married the Prophet ﷺ, and one was Khalid bin Walid's mother. So this is a bit about Khalid bin Walid's mother and his father, his family, his background. We have to understand. Before we talk about his achievements, let's talk about his life. How he grew up. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu was given expert training to become a great soldier. His father enrolled him into becoming an expert on riding the horse, on fighting on horseback. He became an expert on archery and swordsmanship. He was an expert in all military aspects and departments of that time. So Khalid bin Walid is a unique warrior in the history of mankind. There are very few warriors like Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, if any. Genghis Khan of the Mughal Empire, ruthless, fearless leader who conquered so much land in the space of less than 20 years. Genghis Khan was controlling everything. We see Alexander the Great. Before the time of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Alexander was given as an example. We see great warriors and fighters like Caesar, who was a great ruler of the Roman Empire. At the same time, a great warrior and fighter. We see great warriors and fighters have come throughout mankind. But none of them are equal to Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. As Muslims, when the other civilizations put forth the great, the Persians put Rustam forward, the Romans put Alexander and Caesar forward, and the Mongols, they put Genghis Khan forward, we put Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid forward. But if you are like him, how Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu is growing up, learning how to become an expert in warfare, in tactical genius on the battlefield. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid is a great fighter on the battlefield. Such a warrior and fighter that never tasted defeat on the battlefield in his life. Never tasted defeat. When Khalid bin Walid went on the battlefield, it was his. He was victorious in every single battle that he fought in. Every single battle Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid fought in, he came out victorious. Allahu Akbar. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu was very good friends with the great Sahabi and companion Sayyidina Umar. One day the two of them were wrestling with each other. And Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid floored Sayyidina Umar and broke his leg. And it's narrated Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid looked like Sayyidina Umar. They had the same build and stature. So you couldn't tell major difference between Khalid bin Walid and Umar Farooq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And we know that Sayyidina Umar was fearless. Any individual who disrespected the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Umar would not spare him. It was the mercy of Rasulullah ﷺ that spared them. Salam had mercy and said, leave him, Umar. Yet every time, Da'ni ya Rasulullah, Idhinni ya Rasulullah, give me permission. Ana adribu unuka hadha al-munafiq. I will chop this munafiq's head off. Give me permission. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no. Umar, easy. So Sayyidina Umar, he had this sense of bravery and courage inside him. And he was very good friends with Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu. When Islam started, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was a staunch opponent of Islam. He was against the Muslims. He was fighting against the Muslims. He wanted to kill the Muslims. He had no interest with what Muslims were doing. He was more interested in fighting. But when he would hear about Muslims, he wasn't happy. So the Prophet ﷺ, as we know, Islam started when the Prophet ﷺ was 40 years old. They announced their prophethood and the advent of Islam. At this time, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu was 24 years old. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was 24 years old when Ilan al-Nabuwwat occurred, when the first ayat of the Quran were revealed. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was 24 years old. And he spent most of his time training, becoming an expert in these matters. Why? It was written and destined for him that so much was going to be taken from him and so much victory was going to be given Muslims on his hands. It's amazing. But then this Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam migrated to the city of Medina Munawwara, because the oppression, the atrocities, the persecution of the non-Muslims increased. It was very hard to live in Makkah Sharif. Therefore, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were given permission to migrate. At that time, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was around 39 years old. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was around 39, 40 years old when the Prophet ﷺ migrated. Till now, Khalid bin Walid has not fought in many battles. He's waiting for his opportunity. When the Prophet ﷺ entered into Medina Sharif, a new chapter for the Muslims, a Muslim state now, controlled, governed and ruled by the Prophet ﷺ, we see that the non-Muslims prepared to do battle with the Sahaba. The first major battle in Islam, the Quraysh that didn't accept Islam prepared an army to go and defeat the Muslims and to end Islam on the plains of Badr. In the second year of Hijri, 2 years after migration, the Meccans built an army of 1,000 men, and the Sahaba had 313 warriors, the warriors and soldiers of Badr, who the Prophet ﷺ would make immense dua for, and who Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said all of them are in paradise. These were the first warriors of Islam to fight on the battlefield in a major battle. And from them, great warriors of the Badr, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid wasn't amongst the army of the Quraysh. He did not fight against these Muslims. It was in the following year in Uhud, in the third year of Hijri, that Khalid bin Walid was called upon his services. And in the third year of Hijri, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu prepared and was part of the army of the Quraysh. The army in this battle, in the first battle, the Muslims defeated through the help of the angels and through the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Muslims defeated the Quraysh. 313 overcame 1,000. In the battle of Uhud, 3,000 army has come now. An army that consists of 3,000 men arrives at Medina Sharif again, near Uhud. Arrives in Uhud near Medina Sharif. So the Prophet ﷺ prepared an army. They come to attack us again the following year. They've already tasted defeat, they want more. So they arrive. 3,000 man army, Khalid bin Walid is in there. He has 300 men under his control. And he is the Quraysh's cavalry. He is on horseback. In this battle, he didn't do anything but one maneuver. One maneuver that put the Muslims into great difficulty in the battle of Uhud. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu is part of that army of the Quraysh, the non-Muslims. The Muslims had 700 warriors in this battle. The battle began. The Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba are defeating them. The Quraysh are retreating. Nabi alayhi salam said to the Sahaba, who were led by Sayyidina Abdullah bin Jahash radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he had 50 archers under his command, that your job is to stand on the mountain of Uhud and don't leave this. Whatever you do, If you see the Quraysh retreating back towards Mecca and in defeat, don't leave. If you see us winning, if you see them retreating, losing, don't leave. In any case, do not leave this mountain. We say at this point the Prophet ﷺ knew. They knew what Khalid bin Walid was to do. So the clear instructions were, do not leave the mountain of Uhud, stay firm. When the Muslims were becoming victorious, the archers, some of them, the young ones, it's reported, they left the mountain. And they started marching and helping the Sahaba to push the Quraysh back, to push the Mushrikeen of Mecca back towards. So they're attacking them from the front. We see Khalid bin Walid was very carefully maneuvering around the mountain of Uhud. Imagine, here is the Meccan army, here's the Muslims. The mountain of Uhud is there. The archers are behind the Muslims. The Muslims are pushing the Meccans back, pushing them. The archers come off the mountain. Khalid bin Walid stood on the side with 300. Very cleverly, what did Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu do? He took his cavalry from behind the mountain and he sandwiched the Sahaba. He came from behind. Now the Sahaba are in the middle of Khalid bin Walid and in the middle of the Quraysh. So the tides of the battle turned. One maneuver Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid did. That's all he waited for in the battle of Uhud. And then we see that when rumors started spreading amongst the Sahaba that the Prophet ﷺ, Ma'adallah, has been killed. Ma'adallah, the Prophet ﷺ has left this world. And there came a state of frenzy. The Sahaba went into a state. They could not believe. This can't be true. So many Sahaba fought valiantly and tasted the sweetest of martyrdoms. They became shaheed. But when news reached the Sahaba on the battlefield, the Prophet ﷺ is alive. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam are alive. It is then that we see the Sahaba regroup. Sayyidina Mus'ab bin Umair was martyred, they regrouped. Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu was martyred in this battle. Sayyidina Hanzala was martyred in this battle. Al-Ghasil radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Many Sahaba were martyred, many great companions were martyred in this battle. They regrouped and we see that the Muslims began to retreat and climbed on the mountain of Uhud. And this is how the battle ended. The Quraysh were below and they said, this is when the famous words of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when Abu Sufyan said, we are victorious. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, we are victorious. Said, how? Said, our victory is that those who have died from the Muslims on the battlefield have entered into paradise. And those that have died from your army have gone to the fire of hell. Abu Sufyan said, then be prepared, be ready. Next year we will fight again. So this was the third year of Hijri in Uhud. Khalid bin Walid now, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, was not a Muslim at that time, was not a Muslim. He now, we see, is engaging in battle. And Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu were around 42, 43 years old. 42, 43 years old, 44 years, around this age, the early 40s. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, then in the following year, the third battle took place called Khandaq, the battle of the trench. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the Sahaba, we seen that the Jews violated the terms and conditions of staying in Medina Munawwara, and they became internal enemies of the Muslims. They allied with the Quraysh, the non-Muslims of Makkah Mukarramah, and prepared an army to come and fight against the Muslims. An army that had 10,000 people in it. Amongst them was Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu. We see that when they marched towards Medina Sharif, 10,000 man army, the Sahaba were numbering around 3,000. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam was given advice from Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was an expert in Persian military warfare. He said, Ya Rasulullah, in Persia, when we are on the defensive, when the battle is a defensive battle, not an offensive battle, in a defensive battle, we would dig a trench so deep that the enemies could not jump over or come through. And the Prophet ﷺ liked this idea of Sayyidina Salman al-Farisi radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and ordered the Sahaba to dig a trench. That they did for over 20 days they were digging. So the trench was made. This was known as Ahzab or Khandaq, which Allah talks about in the Quran in Surah Al-Ahzab. We see Khalid bin Walid is now in this army as well. When they arrived there, they see a trench, they were baffled. The Arabs had never seen such tactics ever before. Said, this is not the way of the Arabs, this is a Persian way. But this was the genius of the Prophet ﷺ. This is why we say Nabi ﷺ was a genius tactician on the battlefield. Nabi ﷺ was the best. One maneuver by digging the trench and they were destroyed. We see that they could not jump over. And even when they did jump over, Amir ibn Abd Wud, he was a Jewish man who jumped over one part of the trench which was narrow, not as wide. And it's reported that Khalid bin Walid also jumped over. He got his horse and he jumped straight over this ditch, this trench that was made, and Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid went there. He was there and he was seeing Amir bin Abd Wud. This man is a fearless fighter for the Jews. He has a reputation amongst the Arabs. He's undefeated. He could take on 100 men. He's reported in Sunnah 1,000 men on his own. He would lift an animal and use it as a shield. He had so much strength. When Amir bin Abd Wud jumped over, he taunted the Sahaba and said, who's going to fight? Let me tell you a beautiful story. Who's going to fight? Which one of you dares challenge me and fights me? Allah. Sahaba stayed quiet. Sayyidina Ali stood up. Sayyidina Ali said, Ya Rasulullah, I will fight you. Give me permission. Nabi alayhi salam said, sit down Ali, not you. Again, Amir bin Abd Wud's taunting the Sahaba, who dares to challenge me and fight me? I'm undefeated. He was like the Rustam of the Arabs. He was the Alexander of the Arabs. He was the Montgomery of the Arabs. This individual was the Napoleon of the Arabs. This individual was a great general fighter of the Arabs. One-on-one he was undefeated. Never lost a duel in his life. But on the second occasion, again, Sayyidina Ali stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, please, let me go. Prophet said, no, sit down. The third time he continued to taunt. Sayyidina Ali stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, let me go and fight him. This time, Sher Khuda Mushkil Kusha, the Lion of Allah, ready, came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that Sayyidina Ali had something different here. The Prophet ﷺ took off the blessed turban, put it on Sayyidina Ali, took out the sword, gave it to Sayyidina Ali, made dua and said, Ali, go and fight. Amir bin Abd Wud was best friends and good friends with Sayyidina Ali's father Abu Talib. So when the time came, the two stood in front of each other. Sayyidina Ali, in terms of stature, was short. He wasn't tall. They were short and stocky. And Sayyidina Ali had a lot of hair on their body. But they were very firm and strong. And Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib was fighting a man who was tall, built, strong, twice the size of Sayyidina Ali. Twice the size of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Allahu Akbar. We see that when this happened, Amir bin Abd Wud said, who are you? He said, I am Ali, the son of Abu Talib. He said, Abu Talib is a good friend of mine. I don't want to fight you. The father is a very good friend. I don't want to fight you, send somebody else. And Ali said, you don't want to fight me, but I want to fight you.
Subhanallah.
You don't want to kill me, but I am here to kill you. And when they started, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala floored him and chopped his head off. Came back victorious. We see how did this battle end. Overnight the weather was cold, very, very cold weather. Far colder than what you'd find in Scotland, even though you're used to the cold. Very cold weather. In Medina Munawwara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent winds, and through the help of winds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed the Quraysh. That they fled and retreated. They said, it's too cold here. This is not the weather to fight in. The pots and pans turned. By morning, When it came, the Sahaba went to see, their pots and pans were overturned by the wind, and they had retreated and gone back to Makkah Mukarram. The Jews fled, ran towards Khaybar. Allahu Akbar. This took place in the 4th year of Hijri. 4th or 5th year of Hijri. And we see that Sayyidina Khalid Bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu has now seen and participated in 2 battles, Khandaq and Uhud. And it is reported in the biographies that have been written about Sayyidina Khalid Bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was constantly thinking how Muslims are so successful. Because his mindset was a military mindset. He was interested. What was his interests? Fighting, the battlefield. So he could relate. He said, it's amazing how the Prophet Muhammad has not been defeated. Yet, we have had more numbers than him. Our army is twice as big as his army. 2/3 of our army size is bigger than the army that they bring. Yet they still defeat us. He could not fathom this thought. This was now leading towards him coming towards Islam. Allahu Akbar. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, we see that in the 7th year of Hijri, and in some narrations the 8th year of Hijri, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba set out to perform Umrah. And they were stopped at a place called Hudaybiyah. At Hudaybiyah, they were not allowed to go any further. Terms were agreed where a sulh, a truce was made between the Quraysh and the Muslims. That you will not be allowed to perform Umrah this year, go back. Go back to Medina. From next year onwards, every single year, you can perform Umrah for 3 days. That's one term of the truce. The second term is this, that you, the Muslims, you will have to, Allahu Akbar, return back anyone from the Quraysh that you have captured. And if we have captured any of your people, we will not return them back. These were terms and truces of the contract that was agreed between Suhail bin Amr, who was a representative of the Quraysh, and the Prophet ﷺ. Nabi alayhi salam agreed to this. Nabi alayhi salam agreed. Many Sahaba did not approve. They did not agree with this. So how can it be, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that the Quraysh, anyone of them from Makkah that is captured, he is allowed to go back. And if any Muslim is captured, they're allowed to keep him. They don't send him back. This is unfair. But the Prophet ﷺ could see what they could not see. Nabi Salam's wisdom was far greater. And the one in the creation of Allah Almighty who had the most wisdom was the Prophet ﷺ. Nabi Salam agreed to these terms. To the point, Sahaba were not ready to leave Hudaybiyah. At that point, what happened? Allahu Akbar. They went to the tent and said that Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa al-Mu'mineen. Nabi sallallahu said the Sahaba they're not moving. And that's when Sayyidah Salama said, Ya Rasulullah, you go out, the camels that we've bought to sacrifice for the Umrah, you sacrifice them. Don't say nothing. And they will do as you do. Prophet ﷺ went out, took hold of the camel, sacrificed the camel. As soon as they done this, all the Sahaba stood up and followed the Prophet ﷺ. And they returned back to Medina. At this point here, it's reported that Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu accepted Islam in this year, in the year of Hudaybiyah. He was leaving Makkah Sharif to go towards Medina Munawwarah. He bumped into Amr bin al-As, and he bumped into Usman ibn Talha. When these individuals at night bumped into each other and said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to the city of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm going to Medina Sharif to see the Messenger of Allah Almighty and to accept Islam. Come with me. Amr bin al-As and Khalid bin Walid were fearless commanders in the battlefield. These two were best friends. Amr bin al-As and Khalid bin Walid were best friends. And these were individuals who constantly fought alongside each other against the enemies. They all went to the Prophet ﷺ. When Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam heard Khalid bin Walid has come, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam made special time for Khalid bin Walid. Made dua for Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, at this time, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's age, how old was Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid? Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu around 40, early 40s. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid were around the early 40s at this time. Because the Prophet ﷺ in the 7th year of Hijri, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam's age was 59 years old. Take off 14, 15 years, you are left with 43, 44, 45. And Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, I think I made a mistake previously. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid were 35 years old at the time of Hijri, at the time of migration. So when Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid fought in the early battles of Uhud and Khandaq, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's age at that time were late 30s. They were in the late 30s then. And in the battle of, at the time of accepting Islam, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid were in the early or mid 40s. So Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid came, accepted Islam. The Prophet ﷺ was very happy. We see as soon as Khalid bin Walid enters into Islam, the Muslims are preparing to fight again. This time, the fight for the Muslims was the Battle of Mu'ta. The Battle of Mu'ta. The Prophet ﷺ in the 7th year of Hijri wrote letters to all the leaders around the world leaders to accept Islam. One of the leaders that was going towards Mu'ta, when he arrived there, a emissary of the Romans killed the ambassador of the Prophet ﷺ. So in revenge for this, the Prophet ﷺ prepared an army to go and fight in Mu'ta. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, in this army, Zayd bin Harisa is the commander-in-chief. If Sayyidina Zayd is martyred, Ja'far, the son of Abu Talib, Sayyidina Ali's brother, elder brother, he will be the commander-in-chief. If Sayyidina Ja'far is martyred, then Sayyidina Abdullah, the son of Rawaha, he will be in charge. This was in the Battle of Mu'ta in the 8th year of Hijri. Allahu Akbar. They went out to fight. The Roman army consisted of 100,000 men. The Sahaba were far less in number. The Romans had a far greater army in terms of size. When the Sahaba seen that the Romans have such a large army, many Sahaba began to question. It is then that it's reported, Sayyidina Abdullah bin Rawaha stood up and he gave a great speech to pump the Sahaba up to go and fight in battle. Said, Allah Almighty has chosen us. We will not leave this battlefield except in two states. Either we leave victorious or we leave this battlefield as martyrs. Otherwise, there is no concept or even thought of being defeated or loss occurring to the Muslims. Allahu Akbar. When this battle started, Sayyidina Zayd bin Harisa was martyred. Ja'far bin Abi Talib held the flag of Islam. Sayyidina Ja'far's arms were chopped off and they were martyred. The Prophet ﷺ said, if Ja'far is martyred, is killed, who will take charge? Abdullah bin Rawaha. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Rawaha was a great poet. He used to write many praises in the form of poetry of the Prophet ﷺ. Nabi Islam used to say to Abdullah bin Rawaha, praise, read. Read the poetry you have written. Allahu Akbar. He was a personal Naat Khan of the Prophet ﷺ. Person who used to praise Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. Amongst those who used to praise Islam and the warriors of Islam. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Rawaha was martyred. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam gave instructions that if these three are martyred, that they did not give any further instructions. This now was an opportunity for Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid to make his mark on the Muslim army. When this battle got intense, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid rallied the Sahaba together. He picked the flag up and he began to fight. Fighting, 9 swords Khalid bin Walid broke in this battle. Can you imagine how intense? Imagine how intense this battle was. 9 swords broke in Khalid bin Walid's hands. There was only one sword that remained, and that was a Yemeni sword. Khalid bin Walid planted so much pressure on the Romans. They did not know what hit them. And they were defeated. They retreated back towards Syria. This was on the border of Syria, this battle took place. On the border of Syria and Hijaz, which is now known as modern-day Saudi Arabia. This battle took place on the border. They retreated. Khalid bin Walid came back victorious. When he came back, it is on this point and occasion that the Sahaba welcomed, and the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, Khalid, he is sayfun min suyufillah. Allah Almighty has unleashed Khalid upon the enemies of Islam. And indeed, he is the sword from the swords of Allah Almighty. He is Sayfullah al-Maslul. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, Sayfullah al-Maslul. He is the unleashed sword. He is the uncovered sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Bakir sword. Allah Almighty has released Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid upon the enemies. This was his first battle. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid came back victorious. And what was the title that he received? Today, generals get medals of honors. This medal of honor, games have been called Medal of Honor. They have been in distinction for his services to the military, to the defense of his country. Recognition is given to him by giving medals of honor. What greater recognition can a man get that he is called the sword of Allah? There is no greater recognition. There is no greater reward. There is no greater honor that a man of Allah can receive than being called the sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that on the blessed tongue of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi alayhi salam is saying, Khalid, you are the sword from the swords of Allah. Allahu Akbar. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu fought valiantly in this battle. Then Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid again fought in another battle, the Battle of Hunayn. And the Sahaba were victorious. In the Battle of Hunayn, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid first-hand seen the bravery of the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba were weary of going forward to fight. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam themselves got upon the blessed mule, they ride, and took the flag of Islam and said, you know who I am? I am he who is the son of Abdul Muttalib. I am the Prophet of Allah. There is no lie in this. Nabi alayhi salam's slogan in this battle, Khalid bin Walid is seeing. In his eyes, there is no greater military general than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is now a soldier in the army of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First time he's seen this. Hunayn, the Sahaba were victorious. We see in the conquest of Makkah, Mukarramah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was given a flag that when they will go to Makkah, Fateh Makkah, which took place in the 8th year of Hijri, when they will go, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, 10,000 man armies marching towards Makkah. Makkah is about to be liberated from the hands of the non-Muslims, the idol worshippers. It's about to come into the hands of the believers. Nabi alayhi salam breaks the 10,000 man army into battalions of 1,000. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid is appointed as a leader of one of those battalions. He is in charge of one of them. So he is marching into Makkah Mukarramah. Then we see Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in Fateh Makkah. He took part in this. Then he was sent to spread Islam in Dawmatul Jundal. He went and spread Islam there. That place all became Muslim on the da'wah of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. It's reported Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was a great speaker as well. For he used to rally the Sahaba. He used to rally his troops up to go and fight into battle. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam left this world, when Nabi sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam left this world, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu were in the late 40s. In the late 40s, when Nabi sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam left this world. Allahu Akbar. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, immediately after Nabi alayhi salam left this world, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq was appointed for the Muslim army. He said Khalid bin Walid is the chief commander. He is in charge of the Muslim army. He will follow out every instruction I give him on the battlefield. For the Khalifa of Islam, the Khalifa of the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, in his time, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, there were two major issues. One was people stopped paying zakat. And two, many of the Arab tribes who accepted Islam, they apostatized. They caused rebellion against the Muslims. They went back to kufr. After accepting Islam, they returned back. So those murtads, those individuals who apostatized, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq waged war against them. They have become enemies of the state. On one hand, you've alleged and pledged allegiance to Islam, you claim Muslim, now Nabi alayhi salam has left this world and you've left the religion. They were now enemies of the state. Nabi alayhi salatu salam's Khalifa Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu appointed Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. You go and fight these people. This was another issue that took place in Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu's time. Many battles took place and Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid defeated them. Amongst the apostates, there were few who went to such an extent that claimed to be prophets after the Prophet ﷺ. Such as Ma'adallah Musaylima al-Kazzab. And people like Tulayha and Aswad ibn Asad al-Ansi and Malik ibn Nuwayra. These individuals all claimed to be prophets. They said, I am the Prophet of Allah. It used to be said about Musaylima Kazzab. Khalid bin Walid defeated him in the battle of Yamama. In the battle of Yamama, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu prepared an army of 13,000 Muslims. Musaylima Kazzab had an army of 40,000. And this took place in the 11th year of Hijri in the month of Shawwal. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, we see that Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what happened in these battles, just an overview. Suffice to say, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was undefeated in every battle he fought. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in Yamama against Musaylima Kazzab defeated Musaylima's army. Defeated them. In the garden, there's one place called the Garden of Death. In this place, the Garden of Death, 7,000 men were killed by Khalid bin Walid's army. Why? Once they got into there, he surrounded them. And they fought against the Sahaba and the Muslims, and Khalid bin Walid defeated them. And we see that Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid killed 21,000 enemies in this battle with his army. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid and his army killed 21,000 out of the 40,000 in the battle of Yamama. 300,000 Sahaba who were Hufaz were martyred in this battle. It was on this point that the compilation of the Quran to be put together, the gathering of the Quran took place in Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq's time. On advice of Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. In this battle, Sayyidina Zayd, the son of Al-Khattab, Sayyidina Umar's brother Zayd ibn Al-Khattab, who was a hafiz of the Quran, was martyred. In this battle, the great warrior Abu Dujana, the warrior, this was that Sahabi who used to wear red bandana in battle. He used to get a red piece of cloth as a bandana and he used to tie it. And he used to go in battle like this, fearless. He used to jump in the battlefield, eager to kill, for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We see Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid in the battle of Yamama, when marching towards this place to fight against Musaylima Kazzab. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu's slogan, you know what it was? Ya Muhammada, Ya Muhammada, Ya Muhammada. Yani after the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has left this world, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's slogan, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's call, what was it? Ya Muhammada, Ya Muhammada, Oh Muhammad, Oh Muhammad. Many people say, you can't say Ya Rasulullah, it's not allowed. First, you are objecting against Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, who after the Messenger of Allah has left this world, and in another part of the Arab world, is marching into the battlefield, and what is he saying? Ya Muhammad. Ya Muhammadah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's slogan was Ya Muhammadah in this battle. This was the Aqidah of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. He was calling on the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahu Akbar. So this took place, the battle of Yamama, during the lifetime of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq's reign lasted 2.5 years. His 2.5 years, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, were filled with wars and battles against the apostates and those who falsely claim to be prophets. The false claim. Nabi Sallallahu said, in my ummah there will be 30 liars. 30 liars. 30 liars who will lie and claim to be prophets after me. Al-Kadhabun al-Thalathun. Amongst them, in the modern day and age, that we find in our communities are the Qadianis. Mirza Ghulam Qadiani's followers. And we should openly warn our people against these people. These aren't Muslims. These are not Muslims. The Qadianis are not Muslims. Qadiani was an individual who was bought out, who sold his iman. He claimed to be Mahdi. He claimed to be the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, the Messiah. And he claimed to be the final prophet. Another prophet after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Going against the necessary beliefs of Islam. The Dururiyat al-Din. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam is Khatam al-Anbiya wal Mursaleen. They are the seal of prophets and messengers. There is no prophet after them. So Nabi alayhi salam said 30 liars will come in my ummah. And from amongst them is Mirza Ghulam Qadiani, whose roots go back to Pakistan in a place called Qadian. In Pakistan. His fitna arose around 150 years ago. In India, obviously fitna spread at that time it was known as India. But now it's modern day Pakistan. You find Qadian is situated in modern day Pakistan. But at that time the partition occurred in 1947. So this was before the partition. It was known as India. But however, for your understanding, it's modern day Pakistan now. But his fitna is spreading everywhere. His fitna is spreading everywhere, and we need to beware of this fitna. These people are not Muslims. Allah guide them to Islam. Allah make them into Muslims. But these people are not Muslims. These individuals have no iman, no Islam in their heart. How can you believe after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam there's another Nabi of Allah? Ma'allah. It's not possible. ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين. He is خاتم النبيين. Nabi Islam is a seal of prophets. By you are going against the Quran if you believe this. And he who go against the Quran is no longer a Muslim. So Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid fought against these murtads, these apostates. These apostates who committed apostasy and who rebelled against the government, who rebelled against Islam and became enemies of the state, enemies of the Muslims. So Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid fought in the first 2.5 years. When Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu was fighting in these battles, many Sahaba relied on Khalid bin Walid in battlefield. When Sayyidina Umar was appointed as the Khalifa, Sayyidina Umar removed Khalid bin Walid from his post. He said, you are no longer the chief commander on the battlefield. Abu Ubaidah bin al-Jarrah and Sa'ad bin Abi Waqas are the commanders. You are a soldier in the army. Why? Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu made this decision because he started to see and hear Sahaba were relying on Khalid bin Walid more. They were depending on Khalid bin Walid. And Sayyidina Umar was staunch. He was firm in the belief of God. He said, no, our reliance is in Allah. not Khalid bin Walid. Therefore, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala removed him from that position and said, you will be a general in the army. You will no longer be the chief commander of the army. You will not be the field marshal of the army. Allah. So Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid became. We see that Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, in the remaining years of his life, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, over the period of 15 years, fought in 40 battles. And from those 15 years, the last 7 years of his life, he fought in 37 battles. 37 battles, undefeated, undisputed, never tasted defeat. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, he was the one who defeated the Persian army. The Persians destroyed them in Iraq. As soon as Persia came under his control, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid marched in the 15th year of Hijri towards Yarmouk, the battle of Yarmouk, the big, huge battle against the Romans in Syria. He marched towards there, defeated in the Romans in Syria in the battle of Yarmouk. We see Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid in this battle. In a nutshell, just to summarize, in this battle, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu was an army that consisted of 40,000 men, and the Romans had 150 to 200,000 men. And Khalid bin Walid defeated them. It's in this battle Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid lost a helmet. Inside this helmet, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid used to carry the Prophet ﷺ's hair, the blessed hair. His helmet fell in battle. He went in pursuit and search of this helmet. His fellow soldiers said, how can you, in the midst of battle, arrows are being fired, people are being killed, and you are in search of this helmet? He said, inside this helmet is the Prophet ﷺ's hair. It is through this that Allah Almighty grants me victory and death. Look at the Aqidah of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. He said, it's through the hair. This is narrated by Hakim. This has been narrated by Imam al-Tabarani. And this has also been narrated by Alama Zahabi in his Siru A'lam al-Nubala. This is the reference for this point. I'm giving you mafhum. Just summarizing. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid said, it is through the hair of the Prophet ﷺ that I get victory. If Nabi alayhi salatu salam's hair can give you victory, then don't you think Nabi alayhi salatu salam's blessed Zat can also give you help? Of course. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam assisted the Muslims throughout many battles. And Khalid bin Walid said, I gained victory because of his hair. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's because of the hair that I gained victory. I was victorious in battle and got help. Allah. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, we see during the last few years when he was removed from the army, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid settled in Syria, Sham, in Homs. In this place, Homs, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid settled there, and towards the end of his life lived there as well with his family. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, on his final moments in this world, his friend came to him. In one narration his friend, in another it was his wife. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was crying and saying, how can it be that I lived my entire life on the battlefield fighting, and my death does not come on the battlefield? They fell ill and passed away. Yani Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's dream was to die on the battlefield. He lived his entire life fighting. And it is then that in one narration his friend, in another his wife said, how can it possibly be that the Prophet ﷺ has called you the sword of Allah, and you are to be killed on the battlefield? The sword of Allah will never die. The sword of Allah will never break. It is for this reason that you are not to be killed on the battlefield. Allahu Akbar. He was crying when he fell. He said, do you think Allah wants his sword to be broken on the battlefield? If he was killed on the battlefield, what would people say? The sword of Allah has been killed. No. Khalid bin Walid walked off the battlefield undefeated, unbroken in battle. It is reported Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid used to say to his friends, there is not a single place on my body. There is not a single place on my body except there is a wound or a scar that I received in battle. You could not put your finger on any part of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's body except he was scarred or he was wounded in that place. This was a man who devoted his entire life to the Muslims, to Islam, to spreading the message of Islam. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid participated in many military campaigns, and in every campaign he was victorious. He was an individual who was sahibul karama as well. He performed many miracles. On one occasion he was given poison to eat or drink, and Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid read Bismillah and drank it. He said, it can't affect me. So this poison cannot affect me. In another narration, a karamat is reported of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was given alcohol. He made dua and said, oh Allah, change this alcohol into honey. The alcohol changed into honey and Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid drank. It changed, and it's a miracle. It's hard to believe that. Miracles are generally hard to believe because they defy the laws of science and nature. But this was a karamat of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. He was sahibul karamat. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid had immense love for the Quran. He was always on the battlefield. He didn't have time to read the Quran. It's reported between Fajr and Zohar he used to read the Quran. It's reported in the battlefield he used to do tilawat of the Quran and fight. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid is a great role model for our young Muslims to look up to and follow. In what aspect? In determination. In what aspect? To become strong and have strong iman. In what aspect? To be prepared. Allahu Akbar. To be prepared at all times. Fitnas are coming from every direction. So Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who was this great companion who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected and chose from the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to go out and spread Islam. And he will be remembered amongst the greatest generals in the history of mankind. Amongst the greatest generals in the history of mankind, Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu's name will stand up, especially representing the Muslims. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid passed away at the age of 56. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu passed away in Syria and are buried there. There's a masjid named after Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid called Masjid Khalid bin Walid. And the blessed shrine and resting place is next to it. You will know that currently ISIS or the false Islamic State that are out there, these individuals have taken siege of Masjid Khalid bin Walid. It's reported they bombed Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's blessed resting place. It came in the news not recently, going back a number of months now, maybe even a year now. Sayyidina Khalid, just over a year now, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's masjid was attacked. And Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid's resting place was also attacked. These individuals think they're Khalid bin Walids. They're not Khalid bin Walid. They're cowards. Cowards do not attack one of the greatest generals of the Muslims. They will never attack his resting place. And we see that these individuals today, the ISIS, the Islamic false, I don't even believe they're the Islamic State. They're un-Islamic and they're not a state. We should not be calling them the Islamic State, even though they are known as that. They're not the Islamic State. They have no place in Islam. Islam does not allow the killing of innocent lives. Islam does not allow a Muslim to kill a fellow Muslim. And these are individuals that are killing fellow Muslims. And these are individuals under the name of Islam killing innocent people. And mashallah, we know that many scholars have spoke out against this and condemned it. This is a fitna at this moment in time that we are living. It's a major trial and test for the Muslims. And it's important that we unite to fight and eradicate this disease that is spreading in the Middle East. It is our duty to speak out against it, especially in the West. Because many young people think they can go out and fight there. You guys can't even fight yourself to get up for Fajr. And you want to go out and fight on the battlefield. First fight your own nafs, your desires. First become true Muslim in your nature before you can go out there and pass these rulings and verdicts of slavery to bring it back, especially in the ethnic minorities of non-Muslims. It's atrocious what these individuals are doing. They do not represent Islam. They are not a state. They are self-made, self-acclaimed. They have no place in Islam. They can read so many kalimas as they like. What justification do they have for killing an innocent life, taking the soul of an innocent person to kill him? They have no justification. And it's important that we speak out. For not for one moment should you think that this talk is an inspiration towards anything like that. This talk is condemning them. These people are not Khalid bin Walid. They do not have the imaan of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. These are individuals who are far from the teachings of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And this is why it's important to clarify this point as well. I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah accept what I have said. Allah forgive me if I've said anything wrong. Wrong is from me. Good is from Allah and His Habib Sayyidina wa Nabiyuna Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Any slips of the tongue, errors, mistakes that I've made, they are from myself. And any good that has come, again I emphasize, it's from Allah and His Habib Sayyidina wa Nabiyuna Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the great warrior and the sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Du'as of my teachers and my parents. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every one of you. Allah forgive each and every one of us, and allow our children to grow up and follow in the footsteps of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Wa aqul qawli hadha astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa akhiru da'wana.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين. محمد سيد الكونين والثقلين والفريقين من عرب ومن عجم.